และปัจจุบันนี้เรามีชาวพุทธมากกว่า10 กว่าล้านคนโดยเฉพาะอยู่ในรัฐมหาราชเป็นรัฐภาคกลางและที่สำคัญแม้ว่าเราจะมีชาวพุทธ10 กว่าล้านคนเกิดขึ้นมีองค์กรพุทธสถาบันพุทธศาสนามากมายเกิดเข้าไปแต่สิ่งที่สำคัญนี่ชาวอินเดียนี่ต้อนรับชาวพุทธทั่วโลกอย่างเป็นญาติมิตรอย่างเป็นญาติมิตรในเชิงจิตวิญญาณที่มีความผูกพันเกี่ยวเนื่องกันไม่ได้มีความรังเกียจรังแกต่อกันอาตมาเพิ่งเป็นตัวแทนไปประชุมธรรมสภาที่กังกาตาพร้อมทั้งศาสนา4ศาสนามีทั้งฮินดูทั้งเชนทั้งคริสต์ทั้งอิสลามแล้วก็มีกัฟเวอร์เนอร์ของกังกาตาในเวสต์เบงกอลเนี่ยมาเป็นผู้เปิดโดยจัดโดยมหาโพธิสมาคมในอินเดียอาตมาเป็นพระไทยรูปเดียวที่ได้รับการอาราธนาไปเพื่อเป็นผู้บรรยายในการเปิดการประชุมในครั้งที่ผ่านมาวิสาขบูชาปีที่ผ่านมาสิ่งที่เกิดขึ้นในสัมพันธ์เหล่านี้จะชี้ให้เห็นว่าพุทธศาสนากับชาวอินเดียเนี่ยยังมีความใกล้ชิดกันมากและก็ไม่ขัดแย้งต่อกันเลยและอาตมาเชื่อว่าแม้เปลี่ยนรัฐบาลเปลี่ยนการเมืองใหม่มีพรรคการเมืองใหม่เข้าไปในอินเดียแต่ความสัมพันธ์ระหว่างพุทธศาสนาทั่วโลกกับชาวอินเดียนี่ยังคงมั่นคงสืบต่อไปเพราะว่าอะไรเพราะชาวพุทธเนี่ยไปที่ไหนเนี่ยหลักของพุทธศาสนาคือสันติโดยธรรมะคือเราเข้าไปที่ไหนแล้วนี่สร้างความเจริญรุ่งเรืองให้กับประเทศที่เขารองรับพระพุทธศาสนาอันจะเห็นว่าประเทศอินเดียจึงให้การรับรองตรงนี้สูงมากกับการที่ให้มีศาสนกิจของชาวพุทธดังตัวอย่างที่อาตมายกกล่าวเบื้องต้นว่าการเปิดให้มีการจัดงานมาฆบูชาขึ้นที่วัดเวรุวันมหาวิหารอันเป็นวัดแห่งแรกในพระพุทธศาสนานั้นซัพพอร์ตหรือสนับสนุนโดย local government ของรัฐพิหารและรัฐบาลกลางจนปัจจุบันนี้อาตมามีกุฏิเล็กๆอยู่ในวัดเวรุวันซึ่งท่านทูตเคยไปเห็นมาแล้วก็จัดงานทุกครั้งก็สถานทูตจะเข้ามาเกี่ยวข้องโดยตลอดเวลาเราทำมาเชิงความสัมพันธ์ที่เปิดเผยมาโดยตลอดณวันนี้ความผูกพันความสัมพันธ์ระหว่างองค์กรพุทธศาสนากัฟเวอร์เมนต์ของรัฐบาลอินเดียและชาวฮินดูในพื้นที่นี่ยังให้ความเกื้อกูลสนับสนุนอย่างถูกต้องที่สำคัญอยากจะฝากพวกเราเป็นชาวพุทธไว้ว่าชาวฮินดูเนี่ยชาวโลคอลพี่เพื่อทั้งหลายเนี่ยเขาเข้าใจพื้นฐานของความเป็นศาสนาพอสมควรเพราะยังเขามองพระเป็นพระที่ปฏิบัติถูกต้องหรือไม่เขามองเป็นและชาวบ้านในพื้นที่เหล่านี้เขายังสนใจศรัทธาในนักบวชที่ประพฤติธรรมอันถูกต้องโดยเฉพาะการเจริญธรรมปฏิบัติคล้ายๆพวกโยคีฤาษีอะไรของเขาอันถ้านักบวชนักการศาสนาพุทธศาสนายังเดินทางเข้าไปอย่างถูกต้องตามพระธรรมวินัยจริงๆอาตมาเชื่อว่าดินแดนพุทธศาสนาจะคืนกลับมาอย่างเข้มแข็งในอินเดียอีกครั้งหนึ่งนี่เป็นคำเล่านะสั้นๆก่อนแปลยาวนะ
Right. What Venerable Arya Wangso had explained is actually from his own experiences when he spent his life in India, and let me just give you a brief summary that what he said is that the Buddhism in India is still actually active to a certain extent. In particular, the Indian people still have respect to the Buddhism. But what is important is that we usually have thought of Vesak or Visakha Busha, but we haven't talked about Magha Busha for a long time. So Magha Busha was abandoned until 5 years ago when Guruji Arya Wangso had revived Magha Busha at Venuwana Mahavihara in India and brought the Magha Busha back to local Indian people. So what he observed is that Indians still have very strong spirits, in particular in the 4 sacred sites which are related to Lord Buddha's life, and they are still the foundation of the spirits of Indian people nowadays. And at the moment, Indian people still have refuge to the Lord Buddha, and of course in several occasions that he attended, not only in religious activities but also in the conferences. For example, he talked about his most recent activity at Dhamma Sabha, where he gave the Dhamma on a Vesak occasion. And every time that he went there or he spent his life, his vasa in India, he always received support from government of India. And that is very important. Allow me to add that he said several times that it will not be successful if we do anything without any support from local people and government. So whatever he had done so far, 5 years, 6 years ago, he received very strong support from government of India. It's not only central government, but also local government of states. And that's why when he spent his time in India, he had very well care given by local people. And last part is that he also observed that the embassy of India in Thailand, as well as embassy the Thai embassy in India, both jointly collaborated and helped supporting all the activities that he led Buddhist events in India as well. ครบไหมคะ
เพิ่มเติมให้ที่ประชุมได้รับทราบอีกข้อว่าการเผยแผ่พุทธศาสนาที่เป็นรูปธรรมนี่คณะสงฆ์ไทยมีความชื่นชมแล้วก็เรียกว่าร่วมดูแลมาโดยตลอดโดยคณะสงฆ์นานาชาติทางศรีลังกาทางมหาโพธิสมาคมต่างๆก็สนับสนุนอันแสดงว่าเราในอินเดียเนี่ยสามารถที่จะทำให้การพัฒนาทางจิตวิญญาณในวิถีแห่งความถูกต้องตามหลักของพุทธศาสนายังเดินหน้าไปได้และที่สำคัญงานทั้งหมดที่เกิดขึ้นส่วนหนึ่งเนี่ยมาจากซัพพอร์ตโดยธรรมศาสตร์ส่วนอินเดียศึกษามีส่วนร่วมมาโดยตลอดเช่นเดียวกัน
That's a very important part, and I'd like to translate for all of you. That his mission on continuing Buddhism and reviving Buddhism back to India, he received great care from the Sangha of Thailand as well, Thailand, Sri Lanka, as well as Bodhi Society of India. And plus, very important, he received support from Indian Studies Center of Thammasat. Allow me to introduce the Director of Indian Studies Center of Chulalongkorn University. Would you like to share your views? Do you have any other comments?
So now that we've heard from Most Venerable Arya Wangso, I'd like to invite the Rector to present a souvenir to the Most Venerable. Ladies and gentlemen, next we will have a session on India Today and Tomorrow by Mr. Rajashekharan, who is also known as Mr. Shekhar. Mr. Shekhar began his career with the Bank of America in 1985 as part of a team that built the consumer banking portfolio for the Bank of India and has been the country business manager for Citibank Thailand since July 2011. So he brings with him a wealth of experience and expertise in the field from having worked in not only the United States but also Japan, Korea, and India, all of whom are undeniably Thailand's major economic partners. We are very privileged to have him here today with us to share his vision of India. And so please join me in a round of applause in welcoming Mr. Shekhar.
Swadikap, good morning. First of all, I think I'd like to thank all the main patrons of this event. Most Reverend Guruji Arya Wangso, Professor Dr. Somkit, Associate Professor Nitinan, Associate Professor Dr. Longlak Sana, and also I'd like to mention it was really a extraordinary coincidence and surprise for me today that when Dr. Somkit was speaking, he mentioned Ms. Khun A.N. Ram, who was the ambassador to Thailand many years ago, and it turns out that actually he is my wife's husband's brother. And it's so amazing, to have heard that today. And later in the day today, so my sister's husband's brother, my apologies. So later in the day today, I'll call him and tell him that he's still remembered very affectionately, in Thailand and, in connection with this center. The subject which I'm speaking today is India today and tomorrow. I wanted to begin by sharing actually the evolution and history of my own family in terms of where India has come from and where it has come today. To the time that we know our background, around 13th century AD, my forefathers were priests, Brahmin priests, and they were in South India, in a place called Kumbakonam, which is Tamil Nadu, for some of you who may have, been to India or know about India. And they moved around for various reasons to Andhra Pradesh, which is also in South India, finally settled in a small town at that time. Now it's a town, but at that time it was more of a village, place called Karur, which is near Trichy, in Tamil Nadu. My grandfather, my father's father, was the very first in the family to change from being a priest. He was a teacher, and he was a school teacher in Karur. My own father was born in Karur. He studied there, and if you think about life at that time and the nature of life, I remember him distinctly telling me that when he used to go to college in Trichy, he used to walk 15 kilometers one way to reach the college. So that's where they started from. He then joined Government of India before independence of India in 1945. He moved to Delhi. He was the first person in our family to move out from that South India and go to another place, an urban city. He was an expert in foreign trade. In fact, we talk about globalization. He was involved in the discussions on GATT, on MTN, WTO, all the predecessors, of the WTO which are happening nowadays. And further thinking of firsts, he was the very first person in my entire family, from the people who started the 13th century onwards, to have gone out of India. So in the 1950s, he went to England as part of the embassy. In the 1960s, he was in Belgium when I was also there with him. He was on the economic side, on the trade side. And very interestingly, to share with all of you, which is a special thing, he was actually in SCAP in Bangkok in 75 to 78. Then you come to me. I was born in Delhi, so not born in South India. I was educated in Delhi and Bangalore. I have worked, of course, in India, but I have worked in Japan, lived and worked in Japan, in Korea, and now in Thailand. Up to my generation, all my forefathers married only people from the own community, very closely known, and people from the own community. My wife is actually from Delhi, she's from North India. So you can see a change, happening in terms of movement, in terms of the culture, in terms of the change. My children, interestingly, have studied overseas. My elder son is currently doing post-graduation here in Webster University. My younger son just graduated from Los Angeles. They're probably going to work anywhere in the world, probably when they choose to get married, they have the choice not only of somebody from India, but maybe they think of anywhere in the world. I think with this story of my life and my forefathers, I am trying to convey to you that India has undergone globalization, urbanization, and if you think about when my father went in the 1950s overseas and he wrote to his father, the letter will take 2 months to reach by ship. But we used to talk to our children by Skype. So it's digitization. So what you see in the evolution of India, which is what is making India today, which is a combination of many stories like mine, is globalization, urbanization, and digitization. Now, let's touch on a few familiar things that often I think we talk about India. We talk about a large population, which is 1.3 billion, and soon, not later, I think we will cross and we will be the #1 population in the world for sure. We talk about our GDP, which now 1.87 trillion, the last recorded figure, which is a 10th in the world if you look nominal. If you adjust for purchasing power parity, is 3rd in the world. We talk about the growth rate of the economy, which touched about 9%, in a few years. Even in difficult years, it has been keeping a 5% type of a situation. And that I think has attracted the attention of the world and people look at it. We have more than 900 million mobile phones, still little short of Thailand penetration, but getting there. Thailand actually has more mobile phones than number of citizens, as per the statistics. I think everybody knows about India's IT and business process offshoring, the success of that story. And to give you a very personal perspective on that, I lived and worked in Tokyo 2003 to 2007. I distinctly remember this. In the beginning, in 2003, if I take a taxi, the taxi driver would try to make some conversation with me. He'd say, Indo, because they say from India. He says, yes, yes. He says, Taj Mahal. First reaction when, he's trying to talk to me or make some connection with me, he wants to talk about Taj Mahal. By the time I left in 2007, and this is a real experience, I had the taxi driver once. I sat down. He says, Indo. I said, yes. He says, IT. It's quite amazing, actually, what that combination of the English knowledge which came to us, interestingly because we were a colonial country, the mathematics and logic strength which was there, and the ambition of the people created this situation. All of you would also know, more recently, that India is one of the few countries, handful, which sending an explorer to Mars. And it's designed in India, built in India, and it's on its way. So it shows how far the science has gone. And actually, if you think, astronomy in India 5,000, 6,000 years ago, you may have heard of Aryabhatta. It's almost as if they must be smiling wherever they are, because we are bringing back that strength of science which was part of the culture. I personally feel very proud of where we stand today. We always tend to think of our problems of today, which is important because, you're looking forward because you want to see what you do today to go forward. But I think it's very important to realize 2 important milestones. India became independent only in 1947. Up to that, when you're a colonial subject, basically what's happening is your resources are being used and your people are being used for the benefit of somebody else. So the question was not the development of the country, but the question was how to use the resources of the country for the benefit of whoever is ruling the country. So the 200 years after Industrial Revolution, when the other developed countries, which we call developed today, were building their industry, were making all the roots of what we call development today, They had about 250 years when they were doing that, when India was only supplying the raw material and the cheap people and not being developed. It was almost like outsourcing to support that growth. So actually, our own story starts in 1947, and we have great, leaders at that time and over the period, which I think we must be grateful to, who have helped make that happen. The other thing which many of you would be aware as students of India is 1991, and I was a banker in India. I started banking in 1985. We came close to default. India was on its knees financially. In fact, we had to pledge the gold from the central bank to the Bank of England to make the payments for the next month. Since then, we have come to what we talk about India today. So I think if we keep these two milestones, the 47 and the 91, and the progress that we have made, I think we should step back, and I believe we should feel proud, and we should be grateful and thankful, for all those who guided us, through this period. Culture and history. I think this is important, and I do want to bring it into the context of, the India today and tomorrow. Some of you would be aware, we have 22 official languages. We have many, many more languages. In fact, I have a statistic here which says there are 60 languages in India at least spoken by 100,000 people. And for any of you who are interested in seeing all the 22 languages in India, I'll give you a simple tip. Just take any Indian currency note. Indian currency note has the description in all the 22 languages. I think it's often a very interesting memento. Religion. I think India is unique in the world with such a large population to have multi-religion and secular, respecting every religion. And revered Guruji mentioned that when he was speaking about, how there is love and affection, between when people travel from Thailand and visit there, and, when the Buddhist festival is happening there. We have Hindu, of course. I don't know if everybody is aware, we have approximately 177 million Muslim. After Indonesia, this is second highest, almost same as Pakistan. Second highest population of Muslim in the world is in India. We have Christian, we have Sikhism, we have Jainism, we have Zoroastrianism, Parsi, we have Jews. In fact, if you go to Cochin, there's still synagogue which is functioning. And of course we have Buddhism, and there is a strong ties, of Buddhism, with India. Many of you would have studied the epics, and in fact I know here there are scholars who speak Sanskrit and would have read the epics in original. And the Ramayana is there, the Mahabharata is there. From a philosophical perspective, the Bhagavad Gita is there. What fascinates me also is when I came to Thailand 3 years ago and I see the Ramakien is here. I see Brahma, Fra Brahma is everywhere. When I visit my office and I visit people, I see Fra Pikanet. I see Hanuman. I see Shiva. In fact, next to my office in Asok and Soy 23, there is a Shiva and Parvati. The vegetarian festival, which happens in October, November, 9 days. Those same 9 days are called Navratri in India, which is also same vegetarian festival. Slightly different story and reasons, but very interestingly, exactly the same days, people are being vegetarian. There is a great connection, and in fact, the point I make here, I think culture was globalized long before trade and FDI, which we like to talk about. And I think we need to think about that and keep that in mind, as we think about tomorrow. On a different aspect, when we talk about culture, I think we have Bollywood. I'm sure some of you may have seen some movies. It's, one of the biggest film industries in the world. And I'm seeing more and more people like to see those movies overseas, including people from Indian descent. In fact, I'm very happy nowadays we have regular screenings, of Hindi movies. Indian cuisine, I know many people like to enjoy Indian food, and it's quite amazing the variety that we have. Actually, even in South India, next two families, the taste will be slightly different. And often what we think about Indian cuisine, which we get in the restaurants, is one type of food. But there is a range which is infinite. And that's also, I think, part of our culture. I'm also very happy, and I'd like to recognize, I think, Punashish is here from the embassy. I think working with a lot of people here, the cultural aspect, the working together on the religious side. There was a very fascinating ceremony recently which I saw, preparing the chakras, on the food, doing the festivals, trying to get the movie festivals, because I do believe that the strength of bonding increases when people understand each other from what they do every day. That's some thought on the culture and history, and talking about where is India today, and maybe setting the roots for where we are talking about India tomorrow. Now I am going to speak about a few things which, when we look at India tomorrow and what we need to do, and when you look at the general information which I shared with you about large country, IT, powerful, competing with China, BRICS, is a slightly different context. Because I believe that this context is very, very important from the view of India tomorrow. So we talk about the big GDP, and when we talked about 3 and 10, let's talk about per capita GDP. Per capita GDP of India is only $1,500 for nominal, and $4,000 if you do PPP. That makes us about 130 in the world. We should look deeper. We should not only look at the big number. We should look deeper. If you think about the Gini coefficient, income inequality, I think one of the greatest concerns we should have that in the last 20 years, our Gini coefficient is increasing. The disparity of income has been increasing with development. And the measured Gini coefficient does not include black money or unaccounted income. The academicians feel that if you include that, actually disparity even more than what is recorded. This is something to be thoughtful about. This income inequality has also very focused segmentation, rural versus urban. The inequality much more in rural areas than urban areas. Sometimes you see even in sex, the differences. Sometimes you see even in background of where people come from, there are differences. This is a very important consideration for us when we think of tomorrow. 10 to 20% of India's population, which is double to 4 times of Thailand's population, is today below poverty line. I see people celebrating that the figure came down from 35% and 40% to 10 to 20%. But what this actually means, depending on which measure you take, but just think about this. The measure when we are talking here is something like less than 50 baht a day. Less than 50 baht a day. 200 to 400 million people surviving on less than 50 baht a day. This is something for us to think about. Then we think about some things which we take for granted in other countries. Electricity. On recorded fact, only 75% of Indians have got access to electricity. 25% of Indians, which is a huge figure, is around 300, 400 million people don't have access to electricity. What's also interesting is that the statistics hide a fact. You may have access to electricity, but it's not available all the time. So let me give a very personal example. My mother, she's in central Delhi, in very good area. In peak summer, when everybody trying to use the air conditioners in the city, she sometimes has power breakdown of 8 hours. This is happening as we speak. Industries, apartments, all have to invest in diesel generator sets to keep the backup power, which is expensive and not efficient. it's very clear when we talk about India tomorrow that we need to develop nuclear and alternative energy. It's very clear because we depend 60% on coal, which is